feedback we will be getting from you in regards to your investigation into this incident?
You came to President's Committee this summer and you told us that the NUS had changed. It was no longer a voice of millions and millions of single students. It was now looking at the collective interest of each union. With this in light, why is it you and your officers who are dictating to us what we've got to do in Durham and not ourselves as sabbatical officers and other presidents of the colleges and the presidents of the DSU?
Brilliant, and then you, please.
Yeah, the no platform policy, irrelevant of whether I agree with it, encouraging universities not to invite certain people to speak may prove to be successful. But once that invitation's been sent out, do you think you're ever going to achieve what you want by then trying to get that invitation rescinded, as opposed to just getting more publicity for their cause?
In terms of feedback, certainly everyone who has emailed me to ask specific questions or to make their general view known will receive a full and comprehensive reply both to the questions but also setting out pretty much the same position I set out at the very beginning of this evening. There have been sort of additional questions raised about whether, for example, their committees knew about the letter and what decisions the NUS-NEC might want to take about accountability, practical points about the way NUS interacts with its members where things disagree. I will be blogging heavily and regularly, probably, once the rebuttal goes back and forth about all of this kind of stuff. I'll certainly keep DSU in the loop. You can also follow me on Twitter where I publicise all of them. Yep. And I'll keep you in the loop as well, Anna. People I know have been following me on Twitter, which is how they knew I was thinking of coming to Durham in the first place. It's at West Streeting, all one word. You can follow me on there. I do try and be as open and clear and accessible as possible, which is why even when something like this kicks off and you get loads and loads of correspondence, it may not be instant, but I will take time to make sure I get back to everyone as well. So I'll certainly be doing that. In terms of what I said to Prescom in the summer, I mean, like I said, I've said like a few times that I honestly think NUS is a different organisation. That doesn't mean that there won't be cock-ups and we're going to be perfect and infallible. That's just not the case, not least when you do get people from different political perspectives, elected on different platforms, and I wouldn't want to kind of stifle that out, because I think one thing that probably will unite NUS conference floor is that you wouldn't want an entire NUS executive which is filled with people who are just like me, think the same as me and say exactly the same thing as me, because that becomes very tedious and wouldn't like and I don't like arguing with myself. I'm not a classic politician in that sense. But as I did say, I think the central point that was made about what happens when student unions are kind of say, actually, back off, get your tanks off our lawn, is really important and a really fundamental question that the NUS-NEC needs to think about and we need to talk about in Gateshead in just a few weeks' time. And getting the invitation rescinded. There's two dimensions to this, I think. I think they do feel utterly defeated when they are offered the opportunity to go somewhere and they get excited about it, and then the offer is pulled out from under their feet. Notwithstanding the kind of the publicity which they enjoy, I do think that if the result of the BNP not coming to an area is that busloads of activists and people outside, as we've seen even in Durham in the last week or so, if not inviting them or rescinding their invitation means that there are less BNP campaigners in a particular area in a given week or on a given day, I really don't think that's a bad thing. If it means, if them not being here this Friday means that their supporters aren't here with them, organising during the day, going door to door in place in County Durham, then I really think that is a good thing, because that's one of the problems of giving them a platform in places like this. One of the leaflets I saw on the way in was sort of saying that, the NUS president, he thinks he can talk about, obviously, it kind of says, you know, people can't be trusted. That was it. It was one of the slogans. My problem isn't with trusting people or trusting people in forums like this. It's the consequences of what happens when they're invited.
You said you want them standing on street corners talking to everybody.
Whoa! No, I don't want the BNP standing on corners talking to everybody. I'd rather they weren't there. What I'm saying is there is a difference between saying that the state should ban people and stop people from speaking, you know, altogether, and between membership organisations saying we've got a platform available. Who are we going to invite this term? Do we invite the BNP? No, actually, we're not going to have them along. There's a difference between the two things, a fundamental difference. But as I said, I think that if the result of the BNP not coming here this Friday is that there are less activists in town and less people knocking on doors in County Durham, then that is at least some degree of success in a pretty bleak situation otherwise.
Can you please answer the question of what would happen after we've sent the invitation now?
Well, I'm just saying, that's the point I'm making. Yes, of course, if you send an invitation and rescind it, it does give them the option of publicity, and they try and generate as much hay about that as possible. I know, I'm not.
You held the BNP.
Well, if there's one thing I'll say as a historian of European fascism is it's not a word to bandy around or use lightly.
No, absolutely.
You know, I think we cheapen and weaken our arguments against the actual fascists who exist, and they're not people we disagree with. They're people whose ideology is rooted in fascist ideals, and that is what the BNP is about, and that's what they stand for. And that's why ultimately, in direct answer to the question, if a letter goes out and gets rescinded, if the difference between those two things is they either come along, there's a big hoo-ha, and then they go again, and their people are out on the streets in County Durham, and they're around in town that day, and they're knocking on people's doors, and they're using the BNP's presence as a hook to get their people out in places like this. If that's what happens when they come, or the letter is rescinded, and those people aren't around, and they're not out knocking on doors, and they're not using it as a hook, then I do think that there is at least some small silver lining in an otherwise pretty miserable cloud.
Have you seen their website recently? They are using this for their publicity now it's being rescinded.
Of course they are. But the point, but of course they are. But the final point I made, in all of this, they only ever get the opportunity to talk about their appearances in places like this, or the Cambridge Union, or the Oxford Union, or any other meeting setting where people choose to invite them, if the initial choice is made to invite them. If people